then we have a lot of what we're doing with providers gets onto the list that came out of welfare. So we have both Sarah and Stephanie here to help us get through this in terms of what we have for capacity.
So I'm going to start.
Is this on the web page?
It's not yet. I didn't forgot to send it to Andy short one, so it's open on the machine on my desktop next door. But I will send it to Andrea when I get back to the office. So I'm going to talk to the non-human service pieces first. And this looks like a pretty short list because I have sort of made a judgment on what's truly open versus what's pretty much closed. And what I'm showing here is sort of more, in my judgment, more truly open, like the underlying positions, like the new judge in judiciary, the new attorney in the Human Rights Commission. We basically went through and left everything open, but some things are pretty much more closed than others. So these are the items in my judgment that on the general fund, outside of the Agency of Human Services, are open. And so I'm just going to walk through the sheet. If there's something else that was a base, there's a lot of one-time pieces open. These are the base items outside of the Agency of Human Services. That's all you're seeing on this short sheet. So not on the long sheet or on the short sheet.
And if, as Stephanie said, she's gone through, I've gone through it with her. It's a way of helping us there's so much clutter in our minds. It's a way of, unless somebody said, oh, wait, I don't think we agreed on something, then we want to move things forward. So this is to help us, and you can
short sheet right now.
So we're going to start with a short sheet, and you can see what the first one is, one that we've talked about.
And so the first box are items that are moving from the one-time world onto the base in your first run through of the one-time items. They don't cost you any more in trying to come to balance, but they become base pressure. And so the big one, obviously, we've talked about many times, is the first one, moving the plus payment to the base. So that's the $18 million. The treasurer's tax assistance program back in the base.
And we talked, I think we had agreement on that as well.
And you decided to put $250 to increase the base for the conservation districts and not do the $1 million of one-time money. The youth stipend piece, which was a 2-year item, I think, moving that permanently into the base is the $500,000 item, and then the Governor's Institutes, moving that back into the base.
Just to get them back where they were.
So that's $19 million of base pressure, but it doesn't cost you $19 million. You're saving it on the one-time side. So the balance is the same in terms of the total and balance for 24. Then the next grouping are items that are must-dos, must-adds. We have to correct the out-of-state bed line that had, when the House reduced that, the bed count, that was done thinking that there were 160 beds funded in the out-of-state bed line. It was 130 beds funded in the out-of-state bed line. So we can't take base money.
We'd already counted.
Yes, so that has to be restored. And then we have the decision from the courts on the ad hoc rate that has to be added to the Defender General's line item for that cost. We decided on a small amount of money for the Arts Council, so I've counted it here. And then the family supportive housing piece that you agreed on, but it actually needs a correction as well. The matching calculation for that piece, not 100% of that would be matchable. And so it's still going to be 1.5 gross dollars to increase the family supportive housing through OEO, but it costs 240 more than what was being carried before because a chunk of it has to be pure GF.
Any questions on those?
And so that first chunk costs you $1.4 million of expenditure, higher than the House in the base. And now we're into the box where,
And let's just say, these are things that we have to do. It's not a matter of choice. So now we're going down to the,
to ones that we need to make sure we understand what the committee's position is on. And so these are, again, the items outside of the Agency of Human Services. And so the first one is the piece for that out-of-state debt. It is the investment that the House increased of $899,000 in the Justice Reinvestment 2 line. And do you leave that in? And so you've had some conversation. If you leave that in, it could cover the network piece, the pieces that were in the one-time section for CJC and women's reentry. And you could also pull out the piece of it to put into the barge piece if you left that whole. But it's a question if you wanted.
Well, the Judiciary Committee is recommending the money, but the language should be giving the department the option of who it contracts with for reentry services, rather than a specific, and I think we should carry that through. There's a lot of concern about us naming specific providers when we have a contracting system that requires the state to go out.
so we don't preempt or we don't respect that contracting process.
Yeah.
Okay, so this would
Is that
obviously.
correct, Phil? I mean, what the commissioner said, I think that's what it was basically.
So,
He didn't mind the one no getting it, it's just that.
and this seems to be a top priority. Around the justice reinvestment.
Yes.
And it would deal with a number of needs.
He still needs his million
If you do that here, then you would actually be able to use the one-time money in
to
23.
get him a million
To get him
for
a
his
million.
project.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who is the he?
Commissioner Dunn, For his-
For the million IT.
for the IT.
Okay,
You would do
yes,
that entirely in the one-time money in the C section.
Okay,
okay, good, because
takes
that
it out
was,
of this.
Yeah.
good,
Okay.
all
So
right,
that will stay in.
yeah.
Now, we've already talked about this a little bit earlier today. So next one.
Jobs.
So this is the $100,000 that the House added to the ag budget for the Sustainable Jobs Fund in the base. And that one was clearly an open one to me. I don't know what this committee's preference is.
Well, I really was thinking, we can't look at this in isolation with what we just did over in the ag side. And I think one of the things that we need to go down, and you're gonna see, and that is a tremendous volume of requests in our justice system. And so we're gonna have to set priorities around some of those base costs and where our priorities are. And so maybe in light of what we did in ag, maybe we should go back and revisit, I don't know, the 250. We can do it as opposed to obligating base, because Senator Sears and I have had some conversations about the workload within our state's attorney's office, our judicial system, and where those pressure points are right now. So,
Tremendous backlog.
so it is a tremendous, and the expungements are taking, but you on judiciary understand sort of what we've passed and the workload that's created. So the question is, do we want to, what we do for sustainable jobs, do it through the one-time commitment as opposed to a base increase at this point?
So do the 250 and one time instead of.
Well, we can look at whether we want to move that up a little bit back to your 300 as part of this discussion.
That, I think.
So that's what I'm hearing, is we take this 100 out of the base.
Out of the
but
base.
We do the 300 in the ag construct. Okay. So the next two are in AOE. The House increased the local incentive program, the local farm incentive program by $500,000. I don't recall what the base is in there, but
Can you look that up, somebody? Is that like 100% increase or?
I think,
This isn't the one that buys refrigerators and, storage and
DOE?
stuff? No.
yeah, it's through the Agency of Education. And it's the, like the farm to school.
But if you over a certain percentage, you get money.
No, I think this was to
No.
help them buy refrigerators and storage for produce and stuff. It wasn't even, I don't think it was even for the actual purchase of food.
It must be, this has been around quite a
Well,
while, because I don't,
There
Even,
was a program that you had to get, once you bought a certain percentage of from local farms.
you got so much per meal.
Right, that's what I thought.
know.
Why don't we, let's go down, let's see if we can find out a bit more about what that is. And then adult basic ed, and we're still back with no answer as to why this should, why this shouldn't be covered by flexible pathways. And so the House has it in, we could leave it out and then give us more time.
Yes, but I still don't understand why, the Agency of Education hasn't got back to us in 10 weeks.
Well, they do have a vacuum at the top.
I did talk to the head of the tourist center, Bennington.
Well, but-
Was concerned about it, but.
Yeah.
No, I understand that, but
All of it.
it's 10 since the
Well,
morning.
Because the House did put it in, it gives us some time to,
And,
Take it out.
okay.
I don't know, I've never understood why it's not an unvet ed fund, particularly if they're under 18, which is, the ed fund would be required to pay for it if they were.
If you don't have a high school
Oh,
education,
22.
yeah. So,
So if they're under 22, I don't know why it's not an ed fund.
well, that's what we're trying to
Never
find.
understood.
You can actually see the line of the high school completion out of the ed fund go down to 20, from FY 2021 to FY 2022 or 2020 to 2021.
But we don't know why.
But no one can answer why
I
that.
was probably because we don't count those that are GED or.
That's what we should be, that's what we're just trying to understand, because it's a
So
very
if we can
hard line.
figure out some language, but just hold that, knowing that it's something that we
Yeah.
can negotiate.
So we'll have some
Okay.
language around that one.
Because the adult basic education people, their line is down over 2 million.
And then the next two are an A&R. These are ads that the House did for the invasives, 1 position and 500 for
I'm
grants.
not too happy with some of the invasive progress on some of the lakes. I know that there's been a great concern about Lake Monterey and the state going in there and using some invasive to get rid of the milfoil. And the concern is just kill the fish and stuff. I've had a couple of emails from constituents.
And let me tell you, I have years of experience with treatments for milfoil with Lake Maury. And through different iterations of treatment. And they tried everything. And they were losing their lake. And they did bottom barrier, they did harvesting of milfoil, they did everything. And finally, they used, and at that point it was called Renovate Lake, but now it's a new thing. They have scientists who own property around the lake. There's no evidence of fish kill, and there's no evidence of loss of the native plant life in the lake. But it's been very effective around the control of milfoil. So they are very concerned about the bombazine folk who are trying to put a moratorium because they've gone through and the milfoil was so bad, the kids wouldn't be able to swim on they have some summer camps on the lake. And so their experience has been one of, they reclaimed their lake. And so but they went through in the early 90s, a lot of appeals. People were saying, we don't want to poison the lake, et cetera. But people would say, well, we need evidence. I was going to say, we've got several lakes that actually have been treated and we have some experience. So they are concerned about any falling back in terms of the condition of their lake.
Well,
So,
once you get polluted, you're in trouble, and the cheapest way is to keep it from being polluted with.
So the invasives are a terrible problem in terms
Oh,
of.
no, I don't disagree that it's a problem. I just was, we heard from
I'm sure you did. I know
certain.
who happens to own property on the lake,
Yes.
yes.
So I'm hearing that the committee would want to keep this spending
I
in.
just think that we are,
Yes.
as a state, and, you know, whether we're talking about milfoil, we're talking about Japanese knotweed, we're talking about bishop's weed, we've got a terrible problem with invasives.
Oh,
But this is just.
This is
water.
This is
water.
aquatic
This is
invasive,
just aquatic.
but it's both plant and animal. and
Yeah.
It's hard to.
Because you've got
predict.
those mussel,
Right,
Zebra mussels.
right, zebra mussels and other things.
I think we're saying that's something we,
So just to clarify, the 630 includes the position, so.
Includes one position for the invasive related
and then the
position.
other is to add a position lake-wise.
I believe it's a program that was losing a position or.
It was
Oh.
proposed for elimination, I think, in the GovRec, and so this is
They just
restoring.
want to keep the position.
Was it on the list?
I thought there was a proposed elimination of
They
that
do.
position.
They hang out on the
I
list?
think it needs that.
At one point, A&R decided that they would eliminate that position. They determined they would not. The position still exists. It's in A&R.
So you're
as we
saying,
speak.
you're saying we don't need to add the money in because you never took it out?
We never eliminated the position. A&R was thinking that it needs funding. We
Oh,
confirmed
so
with them.
you're saying this reflects the funding.
All right, so,
So
oh,
it's
they have the
nothing.
position, there's no money to go with it, this gives them the money.
Yeah.
Okay.
We believe there is money there. The House chose to disagree.
Do we know what the position is or doesn't matter?
It's for the lake-wise lake.
Well, I get that, I could read that, but that was the easy part. The,
Would be good to know.
Yeah,
Would be fun.
Well,
I don't know.
When would the House, when would the House think the money for
This is in the-
is there and the administration not? Wait, I don't,
one might think that the administration would know whether the money's there or not.
yeah.
So I guess
It
we
is.
need, I would say the administration.
The money is there. They can hire the position. The House wanted to give them the amount to go out and be secure, but the money is there. They can hire the position.
Well, then I think as long as the money's there,
why would we take the money out?
Well,
we're not gonna add
I mean, not add this.
it. All right, now we have
I don't
the,
care what lick.
So are you,
Leaving it in.
We're not putting the money in twice for that.
That's big.
She said it's in.
Cool.
And then the last thing on this list, you can see that the House did not do very many other things outside of Basic Human Services. The last thing on this list is not a House asset, the governor's ad of $1 million in tourism awareness. We left that open and never walked through.
and, we
what is
had,
their current? This is an additional million or was it in the basement?
no, this is on top.
What is it now?
It's relatively modest, I think it's a $4 or $5 million budget.
It's a very small, I mean, it's almost embarrassing.
Compared to other states, it's a very, very.
Yeah,
For a state that relies so much. on
And we
tourism.
did have, we did have the request from education to do more marketing of, no, of all colleges, of higher ed. And I think as a state, Vermont has a higher percentage, but they wouldn't do it, it would be embedded in their overall tourism. So the
Yeah.
question is, do we want to agree with the governor?
Yes.
In the House agreed with the governor as
Oh, the
well.
House did too?
Yep.
Oh, all
We did
right.
not take it out.
Well, this sounds like a love fest.
but one thing, one thing that they should do here
What?
is we have all these ski areas that attract hundreds of thousands of people. Our state colleges ought to be advertising at these ski areas when the families come. The kids see that, the parents see it. They're having fun at the ski area. The kid decides, well, I want to go back to Vermont to school, but you never see any advertising there. You know, I go up to Jay quite often to see how things are going and meetings. Never any advertising in there.
Actually, that would be a better use of that 350,000 that we've talked about for advertising the IRS.
The 350 can be a part of this million.
Okay.
In other words, you can look at how we market. One of the best things that market Vermont, frankly, are our bike trails.
Yeah, bike trail guys,
Big time, and actually employers use that. So,
they pack in wicked.
so it isn't just skiing, it's recreation, and that's one of the big programs.
So I'm gonna keep going.
What we're saying is we just come to agreement, and then we'll see how we could add some language.
And Andy and I have an idea,
Oh, God.
just
Vaguely.
in terms of advertising. What if we had a magazine devoted exclusively to marketing Vermont?
We could call it.
Call it like Vermont.
He's not even paying attention.
Yeah,
Senator Westman, we're talking about you.
Uh-oh.
Could you?
She asked a question.
Well, I'm sorry,
No,
but
the
you were
moment's
paying
passed.
attention. The moment's passed.
Vermont life.
I don't wanna do, I ignore that by doing that introduction. I've been skinned by that cat before.
It's a new one.
Yeah, this is the new
How
Vermont.
how about a glossy
Oh,
brochure?
that's a really good idea. On marketing.
I don't want
6 million in base,
to, and,
and then roll it out.
I think we should study that. So
I
I think
so.
we should have a working group that
And you were
study
the
whether or
only
not
one
we
who
should
took
bring
abuse on
Blue ribbon
that.
commission.
Yes, I know, but I was right in
six
front of you.
legislators to be appointed.
All right, Senator Sears, that's a Tonsion here.
Yeah, right.
Now we are into judiciary.
So,
Oh,
the next group, sorry, the next group are asks above what the House had put in.
yeah.
But for judiciary, for example, I had assumed that you were in agreement with the new judge and the law clerk, that's why they're not showing up here. So that's why you're only seeing the 5 judicial assistants, it should have been.
Well,
Whatever they are.
But that's,
the
yeah.
judiciary asked for much more than those 5.
And they asked for another at least 432 for
Right,
another
but I'm-
5 or 6
I'm-
positions.
Recommending at least the 5
Okay.
because there are 5 judicial assistants currently working on expungements who are not available to do the job
So you're
that
replacing.
they were hired for, and this would help the backlog at the most, I think,
All right, so we're, all
along with the other 2,
right, so,
The judge and the clerk,
the judge and the clerk.
all right, so
they're in the
the
House.
judicial assistants, 360 at the top,
That's okay.
3,
That's what they.
can you explain the 360? for
It's
people
a
now?
$72,000.
The 360 is 5 judicial assistants.
At $72,000 each as a cost.
And the 432 is
Was
what?
the
Is
rest
the, is the,
of what I'm not.
the judiciary asked for more than 5. They asked for another 6 positions.
So, all
actually.
right, so we're doing the 360.
They asked for
Oh, I know.
2 other judicial assistants, a financial analyst,
I know.
a language access specialist, and 2 access resource center specialists. It's a total of 812,000.
I would think maybe some of the money that we're appropriating on the language access would help with that, because that was a request we got from the Office of Racial Equity. And so I'm thinking that, in fact, we are helping, and it's to really deal with language issue access for all of state government. So, so what we have is, out of the list, we want the 360 or the 432. That's what I'm.
I think I'm hearing Senator Sears has always wanted just the 360, the 5 expungement related.
Okay. And then the other would be more than the 5 over the
Yes.
5.
The judge and the clerk are not part of the.
They're not part of
432.
this, they're either, I'm
They're
assuming that you've
We are,
agreed with those, the
yeah.
House put them in, and I assume you agree with those, so that's why they don't show up on the
Yeah.
sheet.
Okay, now the state's attorneys,
Right.
The
They,
state's attorneys
they requested 2,046,000.
right,
they requested 2 things, they requested a slate of positions be converted, temporary positions be converted to limited service positions that are funded by their ARPA dollars, and then they requested additional positions for $2,049,000.
so the House did the conversions,
Yeah.
and they come in and said they need
More on.
more on top of the conversions of existing employees. Now, I told Senator Sears, we didn't have enough base general fund to do all that was being requested from the justice side. And so the question comes, if we've already, the House put in
Well, we-
600,000 for Defender General, we're embedded in that is,
Yeah.
and then the 300 for the ad hoc.
Right.
So there's 900 now for Defender General. We've taken care of the courts by adding 5 of the replacement for the expungement folk, a judge and a clerk. The state's attorney comes down to, we have about what, 900,000 to, out of what we thought we had available to go to the state's
Yeah.
attorney. So the question becomes one of, what do you want to do?
And
what was the amount?
I'd say that
We peeled the end, was it
Many
900,000
for,
state's attorneys?
so you would, have you identified the positions that you wanted? to
No,
give
but
them?
I'm saying, how much money do they have to work with? And it seems like it's around 900,000.
It's in that ballpark, 900 to a million.
So that 2 million should be.
And we can't fund their full request, is what we're saying. So,
But that's 900,000 over what the House did.
The House,
Their
the House,
concern was that the House didn't give any other than.
yeah, the House gave them nothing over.
so
the
we would
governor's
be
budget.
giving them something over and above what the House did. So if they had, how much would the state's attorneys, the deputy state's attorneys cost?
I don't know, I'm asking.
You got it right
right
here.
now.
Don't you?
No, he didn't give me the breakdown like the judiciary.
We'll go back to
I'm
Andy.
asking him right now.
With
Campbell.
I think the way to phrase it is that if it was 900, what are the positions
Right.
and how many?
Yeah, okay, all right, let them decide how
He's-
they,
He sends back, this is typical John, 1.2.
tell them not, or nothing. Okay. Defender General.
So the Defender General, the House did add $600,000 above what was proposed by the governor, and you are adding 300 for the ad hoc rate, which was part of that $1 million ask that he had.
If we do that with the state's attorneys, we don't have anything left here.
I'll,
Do 3.
he'll get back to me
No.
in 2 minutes
You're
what he'll
gonna,
do.
what I'm hearing is you're agreeing with the 600 from the House, and you're agreeing with 300 that you've
Because we
already.
had to add 300 on the ad hoc up above.
Yeah.
Huh?
Typical
Yeah, so
Campbell.
that's
What'd you
4.
say?
We'll take it.
Like it was a negotiation, yeah.
What do you do with it?
Yeah.
So he doesn't answer the question.
Can you send it to Ann?
Yes, he just,
I just
Oh,
It's amazing.
Okay.
400 is
hopefully,
Yeah, we're not, you're not adding.
Where did they teach you that in law
You're
school?
agreeing. Ann, up here.
Okay,
And then we have 2 requests from, 3 requests from legal aid. Above, the House, I forgot to put the notation here, the House did provide $500,000 more gross to legal aid. And they were asking like, 390 for caseload, 440 for expected need in the housing area. And then in the long-term care ombudsman, they had a higher ask, but they reduced that down to 46,000, which would generate $100,000 to
Cover
fully a full-time additional position in the
We need that.
all right, so we'll go with the additional position. I'm not sure that we can do much over what the 500,000 the House has already done.
And then the barge piece, you would essentially have funded with your decision up at the top on the justice
So we
reinvestment
can
too.
take that off. I mean, if we can, I don't know, on the legal aid, at least give them a little bit more, whether they can use it or not, out of the eviction. I think that's really where we're gonna see quite a bit of activity.
I think that's really important.
Yeah. So if we've taken care of the Bosch, I don't know, do we have a sufficient to work within?
So
Let's see.
And,
Oh,
and
well,
would you do that with global commitment or you did it all base?
I think it'd be match dollars.
Yeah, you can see there's a gross beside it.
Right.
So if we, you know, it's a 43% match. So if you
Well,
were
let's
trying to
see
do
if we
the
could do
value
something
of one
on
position,
conditions.
we could probably, you know, it'd be relatively modest. Be a little bit higher than the long-term care office, but that was filling out at full time. But
If
but
we
it'd be in
can,
that ballpark.
I-
Eviction would
I
be
think-
my.
yeah, I think eviction would be, we anticipate that that's, okay, so let's see what we can do on that one.
So that essentially has lots of things stuck in the base outside of human services. And human services gets a little on the longer sheet. And
Thank you, everybody.
Meet that state.
Okay.
Okay, so this sheet in front of you reflects both what was included in the House for either rate increases to providers at the Agency of Human Services or just general increases to providers, depending on how they get paid from AHS. The columns all the way over on the right are requests above and beyond what was included in the House budget. There is a little bit of overlap with what Stephanie walked through, but we can, as we go through, we can highlight that. You'll see that there are 3 columns, both on the House side and the requests above the House, because a lot of these figures reflect global commitment dollars, which, as you know, is a blended dollar of both the general funds and the federal funds.
What's
And so
our match on GC?
it's 43.48% is the state share, so roughly 44%.
It used to be 60-40,
Yeah.
a little bit higher. Okay.
So, so maybe we'll just walk through some of the items. I tried to group them by related area and give you a little bit of context too. We had conversations in this committee about what's the percentage increase and what's the base amount. And so I've tried to make notes in the narrative about the item to give you that sense of context. So we can kind of quickly walk through the first item.
before you do that, what's not here are things like the PNMI, the transportation, the dental, that was in the governor's recommend that everyone was already in agreement on, so we're not it's only.
And we have some language on the dental relative to the CAT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephanie. So the first 2 items are related to the FQHCs. The first item, as if you recall, in the budget adjustment, the legislature added funds to increase their rate to, I think, the 90% of LUPA. And so this is annualizing that action in the budget adjustment, which is, there's roughly 20, you can see in the notes, 20.6 million the base for FQHCs. So that reflects roughly a 3.4% increase. The House, jumping down to the row down below, the House added in the 24 budget an additional 4% rate increase to the FQHCs. And so you can see those dollars played out in the House columns. And then when you go all the way over to the columns on the right, Bi-State has requested an additional funding amount in the 24 budget of $6,899,000 gross. And so to get to that gross amount, it's about $3 million general fund, which I believe would take them to a 10%.
Now, I had raised the question to make sure that it wasn't double, because we're doing a primary care rate increase. And just to confirm that it's in double counting, that the reimbursement methodologies, reimbursement methodology for FQHCs is a separate one set forth under the federal law. And so what we have is quite a difference here if we were to do anything on it, but that's the request that came in. And I don't know, you know, the administration, I'm sure was that addressed in the secretary's letter?
On the FQHCs?
Certainly, the majority of primary care is now provided through FQHCs. I think, I've seen that figure.
I know they need it. I mean, we gotta keep, we're losing them, they're retiring, et cetera. We gotta keep.
Well, this
get
is,
new ones, keep the ones we got.
Primary, yeah, specific health center.
So this is, a
Oh,
form,
I'm down on.
I know,
five.
I think you've gone,
I've
we're
gone
on,
ahead of you again.
yeah,
I'm
we're still
sorry.
on FQHCs.
Yeah, Annie's crunching.
All right.
Stay in line.
So I don't, that, and this is all base. So I don't know, I don't know if anybody has looked at the methodology that my state has, put forward to calculate why they think, the federal reimbursement structure would result in that. Let's keep, shall we just set that aside for now? Okay, maybe we can.
Better.
Okay, because once again, this is all base money.
But we're saying, we're putting aside the extra request, but
Right.
Yes,
saying we would agree at least with that.
yeah,
You agree at least with
with the
the
4%. The question, I don't know, how much would it be a $7 million request on top of the 4%?
I think
Say
it would,
was it
I think it would take them to 10% increase in total, though I haven't validated that, but that is what, that's what the materials indicated.
It would be a 10% increase.
Yeah.
I will only say, most of the FQHs, from COVID to now, and still now, are in a position where their budgets, are deficit budgets. A lot of primary care.
Well, FQHCs are primary care, they're doing
Yes.
dental. All right, so whether we can do anything above the house, I think we'll have to come back to that. Home health agencies, well, they got don't forget, they got quite a bit of relief because they no longer pay a provider tax of nearly, what was it, 7 million?
Yes, they got that, and that was their most important ask, is getting rid of the provider tax.
So this actually gives them a 15% increase over and above the provider tax relief.
It does, and this row 3 is annualizing what you did for specialized rates in the budget adjustment, so you're annualizing an action that we took in the budget adjustment.
Okay, so it's
for
not
rate
anything
three.
more than annual.
Correct.
All right, well, I think we have to
Yeah.
do that.
And then the next item, number 4, within the governor's recommend, he actually had a $3 million gross increase for personal care, homemaker, and respite rates. The House is actually reducing from the 3 million gross to a $2.2 million increase for these services, which reflects a 15% increase for those particular homemaker, respite, and personal care.
Let me ask, how do those rates compare? Because we did put money in the budget adjustment as a result of the union settlement agreement with other personal care that are, does this give parity or not? In other words, if the governor requested 3 million, was that based on having this group of providers reimbursement equitable with what we did in the BAA to reflect?
The home care providers.
Yeah.
Did you match that, your 3 million, was it matched up to the contract on the home care providers?
We can follow up.
Well, I would think that we would want to agree with the House. Yeah.
Okay, the next item, we've already discussed on row 5, the House proposed a roughly 10% increase to primary care rates in the budget, which is 1.755.
And this was not in the governor's
It
budget.
was not in the governor recommend.
But that we're hearing from all the primary care folks that they want us to concur with the House. And I would agree as well.
No way it's going.
No, I actually linked it in the document there, so there's some backup materials here. We should make that black, but. Then the next item was also not in the governor recommend, but it was in the House budget, and that is a 3.8% increase to specialty care rates. And that's a little bit more than $3 million gross.
And that was because of the Medicare change, and this was to prevent getting a reduction in reimbursement. Was that, yeah? So, but this is asking more as opposed to if you're just protecting them at the current level, must be an increase overall.
Increase overall, but at the same time, underneath the relative value
I know,
changes are happening.
That is correct.
but I'm saying, still, the net impact is additional
Yes,
money.
yes, that's
So
right.
even though you lost on your peanuts, you gained on the bananas and,
And it will depend on the flow through, on the, yeah.
all right. All right, so this is an overall increase after that Medicare-related calculation occurred. EMS, I think that's good. It gets it to 100% of Medicare. It's a pretty substantial base. Plus, we have other money for training.
Yeah, we have other $1 million for training, but this is
I
the
know.
number one ask of EMS, and most EMS squads are in big trouble.
I know, and actually, that's why we have the study of the health department to really take a look at that system.
But that's still a 48% increase. For EMS.
Most EMS squads are in big trouble and across the whole state. And I can't imagine any of us not wanting to call and not have an ambulance come.
They've been in very fragile state for a long time. And so it's 48%, but it's because of the inadequacy of the reimbursement structure so far.
48% of nothing, huh?
Well,
It's a little something.
well, it depends on what your base you're applying your percentage to, whether it's 2 or 200. All right, DMH and Dale, these have to do with mental health and DS services. And,
We also have the substance use providers and TBI in the same 4%.
oh yeah,
All three.
so
All four.
we've all been getting emails that they would like 10%. And if I don't see how we have enough money to get to 10%. If we were to get 5%, what would that be?
And an additional percent costs you roughly $2 million general fund
For all these categories?
for all 4 of those categories.
With 8 through 12.
Yes.
The numbers over, you see that little yellow box, that's what it costs for just for the mental health and the DS services, but it would be roughly another $100,000 to add in those others, TBI.
Yes, substance use.
Another how much?
Another 100,000 of general fund.
So it's 2.1 million?
Right about $2 million. Probably a little change on that.
That has been a priority for us to try to do more.
So that's what it costs in the general fund. It generates over $4 million to the providers.
To move it to 5%.
Yeah, the 1%, the full value of the 1% is over $4 million, $4.5 million.
Because of the match.
But for your
Medicaid.
balance on the general fund, it's a $2 million item.
We have some discussion that we may need to do tomorrow, and that has to do with particularly the mental health reimbursement structure. And we have great variation in the reimbursement for the same service, depending on the agency, and over time, there's been just an irrational disparity between. And so the agency would like to have a percentage, and then have the flexibility to set the rates with available money. The Vermont Care Partners would like to say, we want to have a certain amount go to everybody, and then the balance could be used to equalize that rate disparity. So we have a kind of a difference of opinion between the providers and their organization as to how any additional money should go out versus what the agency is proposing. And maybe that's something Senator Lyons and I can talk about. This is, and it's not so much, the disparity isn't so much with the DS side, it's within the mental health related structure. But if we can move it to 5, then the question is, should we say, here's a, move it forward, everybody will get an increase, but those agencies and providers that are dramatically underpaid relative to others would get more to start closing that disparity gap. In other words, if you're low, you get locked in at low, which is what's happening in the state of Vermont with Medicare, to be honest. So that, if we can talk maybe about how we want to proceed on that, but I guess the sentiment of the committee is if we can do more on those rates. Obviously, we're not beginning to approach the requested 10%. I will remind people we did 8% last year.
For all this.
Yes. So if we can, is there agreement to try to move it up a little bit more? Okay, a little more. Okay. The next one is enhanced residential care and ACCS, and there was a rate study, and you can see they agreed to everything, the rate, bringing those providers up to 70, it's a 79% increase, which is a very expensive, and these are our residential care facilities that care for people who are not nursing home level, but do require care, and many of them operate actually memory care units. So they serve a lot of our people with memory loss. So the question becomes one, and that's what we're trying to get into is, you know, how much are we doing for different provider groups? Some are getting 5, the residential care homes, the 78%. I don't have any way of betting on 79%. I don't have any way of evaluating that. So do people want to agree with that, or because the one thing that we're coming down to, and I'm sure we've all heard from our adult days who are saying, look, we're caring for people of the same acuity. I know I've been to adult day and they have people in wheelchairs, they have mobility limitations, they do foot care, they're doing pharmacy, they're showering, etc. And so adult day's got 15%, and they have requested that in fact they at least have 25. Part of what they don't get at all is if somebody is sick, they don't get any money, or if their transportation arrangements fall through, they don't, it's an hourly rate. So I am sympathetic to
25.
to the 25
I am
simply
too.
because knowing the acuity of care that the people, it's not a social.
Well, and we've lost adult days during COVID, and we have a number of places, Rutland being one place, that there is some interest in opening an adult day again. And if we don't do something here,
They couldn't make it work, so they won't
can't make
open
it
up.
work, so they won't open up. So we really, if we care at all about this, 25 is.
So we asked to have, what's the price tag for this request?
It's on row 16, to bring them to $25 an hour, it's $1.4 million gross, or roughly $608,000 in state funds.
Okay.
What's the, if you go to 25, what's the percentage?
It's a 34% increase roughly from their current hourly rate.
So I'm also supportive of that.
Okay. Well, if we can hopefully make it work, it seems that they're kind of an essential part of our whole community-based system. Mentoring, I still wish we could figure out a way to get mentoring covered under all the prevention money that we are, you know, going to have in future years from cannabis.
Maybe, or opioids,
Well, so
either one, or tobacco, any one of the above. And so maybe the question is
should
to
we do it one
ask,
time?
I would say one time, but then also to ask our chief prevention officer to work with various prevention groups to our prevention council and the opioid advisory council to understand what we can allocate from those funds. I mean, even if it is for 15 years, at least it offsets.
I can't think of anything that's more primary prevention than mentoring. At least you're seeing your kids. So if we move that to one time rather than base, and with the language that Senator Lyons is talking about, and that is to ask those councils, and how many do we have? But
Well, right now we have a violence prevention council, and then we have the substance use disorder prevention council.
and then we have the prevention money that flows through
The
the
advisory committee
through the marijuana, through the cannabis.
and the cannabis.
So it seems like with all that money going into prevention, here's a key primary prevention program. We ought to be able to assure ongoing funding rather than adding
Yeah.
greater pressure and demand on our general fund.
Yeah.
So can we do something like that? Well, of course we can.
We want to get a little more information.
Yeah, so the $1.2 million in base, the note here, this reflects both state and federal funds. I think the federal funds is the roughly $1 million of this, and we're,
So the general fund base is $170,000. And we've gotten a note, the correspondence that the actual federal fund grant is ending in August. So
they need more than this.
More than the 480.
So that the 480 is the request that the House funded in the base.
But
It would,
their request,
I think the request is more, that's just what the House.
no, I think the public hearing was all 480. I
this
thought.
480 brings them up to their request, which was 650 in total, so if they
With
would.
the 170 in
Yeah,
base.
yeah.
so, I'm a little confused, when you're throwing in the federal money that's ending in August. Are we then saying that the 480 for next year, in fact, will reflect a loss?
If they're getting the full $1 million we know the grant was $1 million, and the information we got from DCF last week was that's what's gone out this year, the $1 million grant to Metro Vermont. So they would be stepping down from the amount that they get, which is about 1.2 in 23, to the 650.
So they're losing.
650.
They would, from a year-to-year capacity consideration.
But won't this 480 bring them back up?
No,
Just
So that
gonna
brings us to
650.
650, which is,
about
I
half.
don't know if there's any opportunity for, additional grant fundings for them in the future, but it is what their request was.
Get to 650.
I really wish we could keep them level.
Yeah, I want to keep them at least at the 650.
Well, we need to keep them at least at the, I'm just wondering, when the federal grant goes away, in fact, we're gonna have less mentoring next year than we have this year.
You would need another 600.
Yeah.
But if you put it in base and it's permanently based.
Right, it could be one
You do
time.
this with one time and then ask the question about how to go forward with.
I'm just thinking though, how much would we need one-time money? Saying we're not gonna do it in the base. We're gonna have the language saying, we've got all these funding sources for prevention. We wanna have something directed toward mentoring. What would we need to put in for one time? Don't do the 480 in the base. What would the one-time be?
Keep them at 650 or go all the way up to 1.2.
To go to the 1.2,
You basically need $1 million.
but you got 480.
Yeah, you free up 480, so you'd have to have another 520.
And we already have the base. But they're
So
just,
the 170 is a given, that's in the base, we're not talking about that, but they would get the 170. And then if you gave them $1 million as one-time money, of which 480 is moving over from the base into one-time, that would keep them basically whole.
Well, I'd like to see if we could come close to that. Maybe we can't totally, but I really
Okay.
need to see us do less. I mean, if there's anything, we do so much to do community and we pay professionals and we pay whatever. It's kind of nice to do something that actually you can see directly provides a benefit. And I think, Dick, it really ties into your safety communities. The
Yep.
kids that are at risk and marginalized are the ones that are so vulnerable.
You get them early.
And so I just think, should we take, I don't know, I know you want 7.5, we don't have quite 7.5, but it just seems like if there's something that is,
We'll put that into the one-time construct.
all right,
See
let's
what
see
we
what
land.
we can do.
You know, that what's frustrating is we create new funding sources. We've created two in the past, assuming we do sports betting this year. So we created cannabis fund, as a revenue source. We're now creating sports wagering. I gotta remember that it's not betting.
Oh, it's wagering. Oh.
Sounds.
Sounds much better.
It's not orientation anymore, it's onboarding.
Yeah.
Right.
I just want you to know.
And I didn't know that.
No, and what that was, yeah.
I'll be on board soon.
So is it not remains?
But I mean, my point is that we should really be directing these monies to, when they say prevention, I think preventing, we have, we have a bunch of dysfunctional families in Vermont, mainly due to a drug crisis. And those kids are gonna grow up, and they're gonna be adults at a time when maybe I ain't gonna be around, but it's gonna be a problem. And if we don't deal with that now, that's a huge mistake. When we have the opportunity with two new funding sources to direct funds into those areas.
Well,
I think I agree with you, that's what I've been hammering on.
I think we all agree with that, and we agree with that mentoring should be helped
Let's do it.
with
All right.
whatever we can.
Okay, maybe and even for the short term, I don't know, even if we have to look at that grant thing, I'd rather, in other words, just we determine some of the priorities, but you need the language.
Yeah, well, so I was thinking about the language, and it would be helpful to know, how the monies can be distributed. So we have funds from our prescription drug settlement, we have funds from other areas. So it'd be nice to know how much we have, how it's currently being distributed, and then what recommendations would be made to answer Senator Sears' question about social determinants.
And we're
Yeah.
putting money out for Kids Against Tobacco.
Yeah.
And we're hiring the teachers to operate the groups. The question becomes one of looking at how we're directing, maybe that, or the extent to which we are connecting with the right kids with some of those prevention activities.
This is outside and separate from some of the programs that are beginning to be critically important, like the after-school program, I think, is now.
Well, that's primary prevention.
Yeah, and that's primary prevention, but this is different. Some of the funds might be appropriate, and should be appropriate probably for after-school. But I just want to know what's there and how we're using it. We're at a time now when we're all seeing prevention opportunities. I had to ask that question.
How much prevention are you doing?
It's my two.
We'll work on a draft of that language. so we
So,
know that.
actually, the mentors are free. Actually, old farm families used to be an example of that. Kids coming out of very difficult or abusive homes found their own. And a lot of farm families took in these kids.
Yep.
And those days are gone. But the difference of an adult who is giving of their time, kids know who's there because they're a paid professional and who's there because they have a human concern about their plight. And that's what mentoring does. These are people who many of them are retired, are giving their time to really work with kids that are right on the risk. And they come from very difficult, as Senator Sears said, of homes that are chaotic, they're violent oftentimes, or there are drugs, and having that positive adult, we know, can make a big difference in how kids can survive that.
Yep.
So I think we're trying to figure out how we can make mentoring, and even if we have to go and move something around a little bit, and then the language that says we are going to use some of these other revenue sources to support this primary prevention activity.
So part of that, we would probably want some sort of status update to November joint fiscal.
I think it's time. We jumped
Yeah,
on.
you might be able to
to
get
the
along with one less judge if
Let me-
the mentoring going well.
So, okay, I'm gonna keep going, because it's 4:10, and Senator Sears, I know
I'm
you.
gonna leave by 5.
Okay, so I would like to get us through this section.
Yeah.
Before you have to head south. Once again, Meals on Wheels, and
I think that
the House didn't put any, oh, they put $1 million.
They
So
put
the
$1
million in the
million.
base, the million in the base
it's
for
a
the
million
triple
in the
A's.
base.
And that's a very,
And that's substantial,
Really generous.
but I would, I
Million
would
in the
bring
base
up to you,
Quite.
and I mentioned it outside of the committee.
where's Hunger Free Vermont on this one?
I don't know where they are on this, one,
If
but
there's
I would,
anything
I would
about senior nutrition,
think,
there's
this
a
is,
vulnerable group of hungry
this is-
Vermonters.
this is very important to, and particularly in a time where, there's issues of food insecurity. I would say, in addition to this, in language, that there are wild differences between Meals on Wheels sites in what they pay for meals. And
There's also a difference in quality.
yes, there is a huge difference in quality. There's a huge difference in quality, but there is sites a lot in the Northeast Kingdom where people do volunteer to make meals and do that. And I would like some language in the language section asking them to
Asking who?
Dale
Okay.
with the Meals on Wheels organizations to come back with a recommendation about how the money should be divided up. When there are sites that have double the cost for meals than other sites.
They must have the distribution figure.
Well, I guess that,
The quality.
Distribution is all up to the man.
Volunteers, the people who are retired themselves are going out delivering meals to.
Right, and in rural areas, it's very difficult. So I think some language actually deal with the Meals on Wheels organizations to come back with a
actually,
recommendation
that's one of the best things, because they
about
check on people,
how
and
they
sometimes they
distribute
find
them.
it. All right, so the question, I assume you've got language you're gonna provide to us.
I will work with Stephanie and Sarah to come up with some.
You gotta give them
Just a
something.
report.
I got something that I will give them, but it's rough.
All right, so I think everybody's saying that we wanna make sure, if this gets into a larger discussion, variation in price around the state, because some people actually have people who cook it in the church basement, and other people are apparently contracting with restaurants, and the price is different. Maybe that's,
Qualities.
the quality is different, if based on experience, so, all right, so we'll agree with that, and, with some language. I don't know, I don't know, so SASH, there's some, requests for bridge money, because they had a federal grant, and we have 2 projects, and then this is what they would like to have for ongoing base money.
Ongoing base money to expand
28,
from
35,
2 to 5. And then if you wanted to double that, they would put it 10.
2.7 million.
Yeah, I don't think,
So the extension of the pilot with, for the 2 sites that are existing,
That was bridge money,
That was bridge money.
and that'd be one time, and that was
One time.
500.
That's $450.
Is that on our list?
It's on, I believe it's on our one-time list, but because their ask was at a minimum $450 to bridge for the two pilot sites. But what they were asking for was either 2.7 to expand to 5 in the base, or 5.4 to expand to 5.
How
Well,
much
I
of
don't
it-
think we have the money.
But you do want to do the two pilots,
Absolutely.
the bridge.
Yeah.
And so that's a little under $200,000 general fund.
That's on our one-time list.
So that won't change this.
No, no.
Okay.
A legal aid,
I think we
Take
covered
that.
that, yeah, but both of those next two lines.
same for the other.
Yeah.
Recovery centers,
So they have 2 million in their base now, total commitment. The House, as you know, built in 1.85 million gross increase. They also included Jenna's promise in that.
I think that's funded separately.
So, yeah, so you see the line down below for Jenna's promise. Last year, we included 400,000 in the base for Jenna's promise, and we gave them $100,000 of one-time funding last year. And so you'll see that box over there in the orange for Jenna's promise is whether we would want to add another 100,000 in base, for Jenna's promise.
One time.
It could be one time as well.
So they're in the base for the 400. It's just a question of the 100,000. And in that 100,000, I thought that they were working with the other organizations, and they were all working together to, with that, over that 100,000.
Did you say the other organizations being covered?
The other 12.
I don't know much about this, Brenda, I don't have a problem necessarily with it, but I can tell you from personal experience running a program, that when one program gets singled out over other programs, it creates problems within the, I'm gonna call it industry.
I would
But
be,
back when I was doing group homes, and the legislature would constantly single out, for example, Camp Iwanaki, and give them higher rates than we were able to obtain for the same kids. It created a lot of problems.
I would be happy.
And I'm not suggesting that this is a bad idea or anything, I'm just bringing that up as funding one recovery center. Yeah, rough recovery housing over another.
Let me go back. First of all, the governor put this in last year. And it was for a 3-year startup period of time to get the program. So it's
Jenna's promise?
Jenna's promise. And so we responded to that proposed 500 in the governor's budget with some in the base and the balance one time. So we're treating that recovery center differently in its funding. And if you look at 12 centers and what they have is 2 million, and Jenna's promise to get started is going to have, over that 3-year period of time, 1.5. So I think we're saying that program, well, you're shaking your head, but the administration's the one who proposed this, and the 3-year commitment. And it's a fine program. It's a wonderful program. Anybody who's visited knows that it is a comprehensive program. It's not just recovery, but it's residential, it's employment, it's educational, it is all the things that are necessary to support addiction.
It's the only one that's doing it.
In that comprehensive way.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Well, then that's,
It's not the same as our normal recovery
okay.
center.
Recovery housing.
Yeah.
but I would say in this, I think Jenna's promise is in for the 400, it's in the base in the way, it's just the 100,000. And I think all of the recovery centers in Jenna's promise have all been working together. I think they would be fine in the 1.85
And not have the
and
100,000.
not have.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm just saying, we put the 400,000 as pure GF into the base for Jenna's promise. And is it only a portion of what Jenna's Promise is doing as a proportional share of the 1.8, because that is Medicaid match dollars. It's different than the pure GM. Because the comprehensiveness of the Jenna's Promise, not all of that is matchable.
That's why it's.
That's why it's,
Yeah.
would it be fair to do the 100,000 one time again and not include it in the 1A because it's being funded?
And then you would be true to the $500,000 construct that you agreed to last year. And you would do the recovery centers.
I think that's fine, but I think you would find that the recovery centers and Jenna's Promise would be fine if they were done the way the House did it.
Which is just.
In the
what's it-
1.8.
That's a Medicaid dollar, so I.
So if you wanted to, so that's, I'm trying to lead you, but if you took if we understood what the Jenna's Promise amount was at the 1.8, you could keep the Jenna's Promise whole in its original construct from last year.
But we don't.
But we don't know.
I think probably adding it into the bucket here that has the match gets really complicated.
Okay.
It might be better to keep the 100,000 separately because we're funding a broader range of services and then not have them in the 1.8 to compete and
So that would be one.
at this
yeah.
point.
So the one, you are agreeing to do the 1.8 increase, the 92% increase on the recovery center universe and treating Jenna's Promise in its second year of the 3-year.
Yeah, we're fully funding that, yeah.
With another with the $100,000 being in the one-time list.
And the 400 in base.
Yeah, there's 400 remaining in the base, we're not, that's.
So it's a very different program. It's sort of like it's not even like Valley Vista, which is because it
Full
has-
residential.
Yeah, which doesn't have the educational, it doesn't have the employment, they've got a coffee shop, it's really a very wonderful program. If you were to design it, they're designing it new,
Right,
and
I
so
was just
everything
gonna
is
say,
all there.
there must be a way for us to define the model that they have and somehow somehow put that into some incentive program. Because our whole committee went up there a few weeks ago and was really impressed with but it takes some commitment and passion on the part of the people who are organizing.
And the sponsors.
And a couple and some ingenuity.
All right, so, and they of course are having terrible problems with what they have for reimbursement. I realize the percentage looks big because to divide among 12, that's not very much money per center.
The recovery centers even.
And Jenna's Promise works very closely.
Oh, they work
the recovery
extremely closely with it, and they have an association that talks about that, and the Tetros are, go to all of, the recovery center meetings.
Yeah. Okay, so we've taken Jenna's Promise and realized it's kind of an anomaly in this, in terms of how it's been funded. All right, free and referral clinics.
So the House added roughly 450,000 in total. It's 50/50 admin, so you see the 226,000 of general fund dollars, which reflects roughly a 40% increase in their funding. Just for note, we did give them a 10% increase last year.
We've already talked about the AV.
So the question is, do we want to agree with the House on the free clinics? I think they probably,
Do we come here?
boy, I don't know, there's one in Barry.
Yeah.
There's one in White River. I think there are, yeah.
One in Hardwood.
Seems like this
There's one out
9 or
there.
10.
They're handy because they're open Saturdays.
Yeah, no, it's really good.
So, all right, so we'll concur with the House on that. And then adult education.
We've already talked about it. Yeah. Now we're down to the asks on top of.
All right.
Okay, so on row 27, this is the Blueprint Hub and Spoke expansion, which we have talked about a little bit previously. It's a 2-year pilot, and the House, as you know, funded the first year of the pilot. I should have added over in the columns all the way on the right. I think we're talking about roughly $20 million gross to get it to restore what the GovRec had included. So.
And our decision is, if we want to move forward, and this is a strategy to start dealing with addiction and substance use disorder treatment. And our decision is, the House funded 1 year of a 2-year pilot. If we think that we want to pilot this and see how we in fact can better serve this group of Vermonters, then we need to fund 2 years.
We need another 4.5.
Second year.
Yeah. So,
Because you could maintain that.
and if we have the money, I would recommend that we do this. I think, you know, the blueprint, the connection it does with the primary care practices that are serving, in this case, well, you were here,
Yep.
Dick, when we had this discussion. So every area, this is statewide, it's not a pilot, which we realized afterwards. And it's a way of putting that community care team in to serve this very difficult to serve sometimes group of, and it's a strategy, I would think, it's consistent with what you're concerned about, and that is community health and violence. So
100% behind this. My only question, I guess, would be, is 2 years enough? And if the pilot, if it works, then we're already in the base, so it's not adding to a base.
this is just, this is one time during the
This
period
is
of.
one time.
I'm sure if we use the social calculus that everybody uses when they give us a request, that if this is successful, we will actually avoid additional costs.
What I wanted to mention was, and I don't think it takes language, but this committee to continue to look at alternative funding sources to the general fund for this type of program. Same as we talked about with the mentor.
Same, for
Yeah.
example, the opioid.
Agree, yeah.
Okay.
It
I think
makes sense
that's-
that it's mental health and substance use disorder and co-occurring.
Assuming that
But
this
there's a
is as
portion of the
successful
funds.
as I expect it to be.
Yep.
I would think we want to make sure we have the ability to keep it
Okay,
going.
so we'll add some language to that.
Yep.
That's similar to what we did for the mentoring.
Yep.
All right, we're running out of money here, so these are additional requests. The House put in money for Prevent Child Abuse Vermont. The department has said that that wouldn't be, they don't support the request.
What is the status, maybe, may I ask a question? of them?
Yes, we of course may.
What is the status of Prevent Child Abuse Vermont grants for education back when the Michael, after the Bennett murder, the state set up education on sex offenders and so forth in school? Is that still going?
So they get approximately $500,000 funding from different sources, which.
Thank you.
This would double it.
Yeah.
And it's one time, it's not an ongoing. And so that, we've got some others here we need to look at as well. But I think we've had some additional pressures on our general fund, on our one time. And don't forget, we have to deal with the funding for the adolescent mental health treatment facility.
It's not here on the right.
Oh, don't forget. So this has wiped out a lot of our one-time capacity in terms of what we want to do. So we have, I thought maybe breast milk could be covered by WIC. It seemed like it was pretty logical. No, federal government does not allow it.
Would you like an update on the facility before I leave?
We just weren't able to find the dollar amount of that request.
Yeah. Oh, it's on Jimmy's sheet.
Is it on the blue sheet?
I don't think so.
Is that the Winston Barry?
Try to find it there, but.
Nope.
Okay, Cypress are there.
I don't think we heard about, oh, yeah.
Then we got,
So-
oh, and the other thing that we have to deal with, you have the, oh, yes, all right. So let me say that we have got significant increases here. So the question is where we want to put our one-time and what we would do. And I know Prevent Child Abuse wanted increase in their base, and they actually, I think, wanted 600,000 maybe, 500.
I think they wanted 400 on top of the 500 in their base, yeah.
Which is a pretty significant, and, oh, a request. So then what we've got, which we've already decided, and that was in light of the reduction in the federal food stamp program that we knew we're seeing, so we added the money to the food bank because our priority was to feed basic needs.
800 people.
So unless we want to go back, and then we have the diaper bank, and they've requested, that got started off in the pandemic, and we did it through the food bank, but the proposal is to run something through the parent-child centers. And
Is that 300?
377,
$1,000.
so I just will put that out there. The one thing that I don't think is something that, if we all acknowledge the inadequacy of our psychiatric support for our children. So I think the 9-2 has got to be on our list.
Yeah, on the list.
Is that the one?
I can give you a brief update.
Oh, this is the one at Southwestern Hospital.
That
Yeah.
they did a study on,
What?
that they did a study on effective.
Yeah, the feasibility.
They're
study.
they were about 2 weeks from completion of that feasibility study, and it looks positive. But they will have to get an active 50 permit because they have to have an outside space, and that could hold it up. And that, obviously, if neighbors complain,
So that
gets
may
damaged.
not happen.
Well, it will happen, it's
Well,
just
it
the
will
timing
happen.
of
It's
it.
just gonna be taking, I think, active 50 might be quick, might be slow.
Well, the fact is, we know we're desperately
I
in
don't
need
think it's
of
gonna
it.
be Newberry type.
No, okay.
I think
So-
it may be
So just as an FYI, the diaper bank, that money would distribute 1.25 million diapers.
a lot of diaper.
Whoa.
Oh my God, think of what that's doing to our landfill and Coventry.
Washable diapers.
Going to the kingdom, take it.
Diapers are really expensive.
I'm all washing machine.
They don't have people.
Just think of the landfill where those end up,
I know.
washing more than what
So
we're
committee,
paying for.
I'm putting down the 9-2. I think we
Yeah, I
have to
think we
set that
have
money
to.
aside. We know it may be a matter of timing, but we're never gonna have 9 million probably again, so we need to fence that
Yeah.
money around.
Same with the two.
And the 211 is also, that just got lost and because of timing. And I
Excuse me.
think that we need to have, that's a 24/7 emergency line for people who need help.
I think we should put something into the diaper bank.
I'm willing to go back to
How
it.
many diapers do you want?
Well,
I think we ought to put something.
500,000?
no, we
No,
were
they only
doing
asked for
three,
30%.
No, 500,000.
what's the 377,000 on that
I
line?
think we ought to do something.
Well, I'm not disputing that, the question. Well, we're having to prioritize in terms of, I guess,
I would prioritize the blueprint and not children's inpatient centers.
okay.
I agree with
What's
the blueprint.
the 377,000 on that line?
Something for the
The
diapers.
other one,
Give me a couple $100,000 for the diapers.
So,
That's what it's for.
That
I don't know,
Go
that's what they
through
want.
the
I
parent
don't know
child
anything about it.
I should go and raise.
Yeah, that's,
I don't know.
I'm okay with that. I just said if you prioritize my one and two.
Yeah.
There is, he doesn't know you.
I don't, all right, so the sentiment is,
I don't know what they.
The 370.
the 377, if we just round it off to 375, 350,
Fine.
I don't know.
300.
All right,
I think we could
I mean-
round up.
all right,
The diapers,
what do you want to round up to, 380?
380 or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
But you have to
you
take your 215 away.
Why don't we
and
go
you have to
375?
Yeah.
Fine.
I-
That's fine.
And that still means,
spend over $1 million diapers.
well, but we've moved money around here, so the question becomes, we want to do more. It seems like what is falling off though is any money that we have available for the Prevent Child Abuse Vermont request that they get higher reimbursement.
Well, there is another piece
There is
that
one.
I thought was in the budget, but it's not.
What is
It's not
that?
on my list.
What is it?
That's the state dementia coordinator.
That's in the
That's in
House
the-
Fund.
it's in the
I thought it was
Is
in the
that,
budget.
is
It's
that
already
in
in.
the
I told
budget?
you it was in the budget.
It is in the budget?
Yeah, okay, good, I wasn't wrong. Oh, it's there. Oh.
Yeah, okay.
The House added it,
He told me it wasn't in there.
No, I
started
just
panicking.
checked.
Andrea, just send me
You want
the
two?
documents by,
We could use two.
don't worry about it.
No. We don't want.
We could do
Okay.
No, that's already assumed.
Senator Weston saying he had another item.
No.
That's
So
it.
he wants two coordinators.
Don't send me it the wrong way. Yeah.
Well, you should have asked me, I could have told you.
So,
Yes.
So what do we end up doing on the breast milk deal?
We don't,
We don't know how much it is.
You know what it is? Well,
who asked?
there's been a number out there. I don't know if I saw it on the news or.
Is that agricultural diversification?
Not really.
Deputy Judiciary is gonna meet tomorrow morning and hopefully go over.
Actually,
items.
You know, a lot of times
Training,
kids
but
who
I
are
also
allergic,
don't know.
goat's milk is really what,
Do you have a grant from JFC?
I mean,
Grant from
the
JFC?
grant from DOC, I think, is what we
Grant
go
to
with.
DOC.
that came from the Department of Justice for all the
Right.
training, that's
Yeah,
600.
right.
That's why we're not funding it.
That's why we're not gonna fund. But I'm thinking that for the S4,
Checking that
7.5 million,
out.
we should probably put the language in the budget as
We have
well.
7.5 for that.
7.5.
They were set up.
I don't know if we have 7.5, the House put in 5.
Hey, Philip, I got your diapers in.
We're over the total, so.
I don't want you to be diaperless.
I want to.
But we'll have it all.
It was a
collateral.
collateral.
It's a hard one to.
Round to go.
Tissue,
Well, if we can put language in
tissue
that
bank for all the.
allows it to go without whatever you put, if it's other monies.
Oh, yeah.
Plenty of-
Well, we
yeah.
got that
Oh,
already.
if you have,
Yeah,
the bill comes in.
But it doesn't allow, it
I'm trying to get.
it sets the maximum at 7, whatever, say it's, originally it was at 10, it sets the maximum. So as long as it's, you know, a maximum of 7.5 in general, what would allow if there's other funds available,
We can do that. We can
like
work
federal
with what-
fund, because we don't know how much federal funding is coming for the Safe Communities
That's
Act.
why you put in federal funds would be used first.
Right,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying it could go above, let's say we end up at 5 million with the house. I just want it to be able to go above if
Oh,
the
to-
Safe Communities
Oh,
Act,
so, sure, okay, I understand what you're
you know what
saying.
I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand,
Shouldn't
so,
be,
so we're saying 5 million general fund, and anything more than we get from federal sources, no limit on that.
right,
Okay,
right, that's,
Yeah.
it could go into the Safe Communities. Funds.
that makes sense. I don't think,
But you were saying also bringing in the policy pieces from the bill.
The
into
policy
budget.
pieces from the bill in case the bill falls apart to the other body. They're just going over it in the House right now.
you need
You
to.
know, so.
I'll do. So thank you, and I know you need to
Yeah, I've been,
hit the road.
so,
And did you hear from the state's attorney's office?
yes, and actually, I gave you one.
Annie was the one.
Annie's
She said.
No, we're on YouTube. I won't read it if I don't show you. I'll show you the text messages. This side of the table is seeing.
How, now, we still have the housing to go.
You have the housing to go, you have a bit of one-time, you should review some of the two one-time sections, the workforce and the general section, make sure everything's picked up. The general section's in pretty good condition. It is the workforce piece that you had some open items on yesterday. And then you have housing. And then, the question of when you get the capital bill, in the House, we are carrying the capital appropriations as a cash fund in the bill, but I don't know if we have those yet from the Russ Ingalls committee carry in this bill. We can work with them when we get the institution bill.
10 years to take.
I told him that we were working on, seeing how we might find some other funds to address the bonds that have been passed on town meeting. This is water, pollution control.
Yeah.
And otherwise, we're trying to figure out how we would scrape together some of the one-time general fund, because this was, the governor had 10 million. The House brought it down to 4, and they're made their decision before town meeting, I guess, when a number of towns passed bonds for these water projects. And so the question becomes one of how we fulfill that commitment to towns and not leave them hanging.
Dan's looking at internal to the capital bill, whether or not something can be shifted from next year into the first year for the water pollution grants. And then see if see how things work next year. If you have some
Was he gonna
reassigned
talk to-
money. I know he had talked to Alf about it, and he
needs
was
to
talking
talk
to
to
Russ.
Senator Angles.
Yeah, and he was going to do that.
Once we deal with that, I think they're done with the bill.
Okay.
I don't know who's calling me.
Is that Mr. Sandman?
If there was
I
any.
always feel like I'm in a.
Oh, I guess I gotta think it's my son.
I'm
gonna bring
Like
that up.
The xylophone
Yeah,
version.
Well, I'm gonna bring up something else in the text.
I don't know, 8 o'clock, it's an dinner meeting. Oh, okay.
Can we, the language that you were
Yeah.
gonna work with.
Yeah.
that's
Oh, my son.
Is he making dinner?
No, he just wanted to know if I wanted takeout. He's
Well,
in Hanover.
at least he's getting
Or
the dinner.
Committee,
Because they've been told.
and Stephanie and Sarah,
Yeah.
do you have other stuff that we're prepared to do today?
I do not.
Okay.
We
We
might
still,
get a big pile of stuff tomorrow.
our hope is that maybe we could even, we're adjourned until what, 11 or 11:30 tomorrow?
11:30.
Okay.
11,
Can we meet before?
why 11:30?
Because the,
It's Florida, right?
morning committees are still meeting.
It's always.
Yes.
So,
Perfectly clear that the shape of the bill will be in tomorrow. I think we'll determine whether you can vote it tomorrow or Monday.
Oh, so why don't we
When
meet,
tomorrow?
we are,
Wednesday.
Oh, 'cause you already
Richie,
wrote
The first page.
Richie and I aren't meeting.
We had 4 bills, we got 2 of them out, 50%.
that. Oh,
First row after that.
that's your bet, 500.
We
Yeah.
haven't talked about that yet.
Sears says it's 100.
Basic needs budget?
Yeah.
No,
I know.
Oh, we can't do
That's the
it.
only thing we haven't talked about.
Oh,
You're unable to.
Ginny,
vote
or
on
is your committee
tomorrow.
meeting in the morning?
You're gonna have to find some time. on
As you
Friday.
know, 2 more bills.
We're out of one-time money.
Why don't we work?
Just 'cause our
I
two
can.
We're totally out of
I
window.
don't, we're gonna see tomorrow.
Why don't we meet in the morning if you aren't
I'm
meeting?
meeting.
And then we
Because
just
we-
committed to
One,
Judiciary meeting.
2, 3, 4, 5 of us are gonna be here.
Well, you can come meet my committee and we
Sarah says meeting.
Wednesday.
Um, I think we need to figure out what we're gonna do because we're still live. And obviously we're not, dealing with anything more, that was just pointed out. If you look at the list,
I haven't seen this.
well, the blue list put in all the health and welfare related requests that we got in the public hearing. And obviously there was a request, the governor's proposed a 2-year pilot on reach out, to support. Obviously, the caseload has grown. In the budget adjustment, we put in $7 million. Their proposal is to support people and enter work, which in this work environment certainly is very positive. But they obviously would like to have an increase in, this would be base, ongoing. The other alternative, if you had any money, is to put it into one time to give more flexibility in the support services or transportation related workflows, et cetera. So the question becomes one of, do we have any more money to add to reach up one time other than the 2 million we've already committed to?
I would just say, separate from that, the support services area right now has a budget that's around $1 million. And if you're going to expect families or individuals to go leave reach up and go out to work, they're going to need some help in doing it. We're going to give grants and stuff. But in rural Vermont, it's very hard for people, and there are programs out there. But it's very hard for people to go to work if you don't have transportation. You've got in this environment, you've got food services that are being dropped, and the supplement that is being dropped for food, and the support services area gives discretion to people within the agency to help individuals that are in trouble. If there was any way to add to that $1 million that they've got, I think that is the flexibility that will help people move off and reach up. People can't move off and reach up without cars, without, and when there's food insecurity out there. And also right now, housing for anyone on reach up, I don't know how they do.
So
So if there was any flexibility.
my question is, if you're putting it out there, we'll have to see what the money is. If you wanted to do it and there's not any money, do you want to revisit any of the one-time decisions that we've made? That's gonna be that's what it'll be. So, I can't.
I think if it, we'll look and see what the,
Bottom line is.
yeah. And just FYI, the list that you have, the do list was really asking folks to come in who felt that they were not funded in the budget or were significantly underfunded in the budget. So it wasn't everyone who had an ask in the health and welfare.
But you actually had them all come in?
Yeah.
After the budget request, after a public hearing?
Yes.
All right, so I guess at this point, we're down to the housing, is that pretty much
The
it?
housing, yeah, we,
Workforce.
And the workforce, we don't
you
get
have to do another cycle
Round.
through on the workforce.
okay, and if we can, Allison and I, we can go through that. And so I guess at this point, what we will do is try to plow through and wrap this up. We're gonna have our final decisions made before we leave tomorrow afternoon. And obviously, there might be some language or some other things that need to be addressed.
Yeah, and so if you're making the decision now, to actually do the final vote on Monday morning.
I don't know. I will reserve that to see how we end up tomorrow afternoon. I don't want anybody to think that they can not be vigilant and apply them ourselves tomorrow afternoon thinking that we've got Monday.
Okay. I hear
You understand that? Because committees tend to take as much time as they're given. My goal would be to wrap this up on Friday.
Tomorrow.
And if we can't,
That's fine.
with our best effort, then we will consider Monday. But so that's not what I would recommend.
We used a word this morning in our committee that became repetitive. That's called
Yeah.
alacrity, so we're gonna move.
And also,
Hopefully
See
it's
you
short.
in general.